Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Torah with your host, myself, Rabbi Anibal. Great to know that you're there. Welcome, Shelly. Welcome, Brenda. Welcome, David. And if there is anybody else there, please say hello. Say hello. Want to know who else is sharing this classroom with all of us? Yeah, we had like a nice, mild winter day today in Winnipeg. Yesterday was even better. I think we got like something like +2. Woo! Wow, +2 middle of January. That was a treat, but it was only one day. Ashira Myers is here. Hello. Welcome. How are you feeling? Let's see who else is around for this class where we are going to study the beginning of the second book of the Torah, the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, the story of the Exodus, and the new chapter, the life of the Jewish people. So, welcome everyone again. Yeah, guys, you're very quiet this morning. The chat is very quiet. And Amparo Goldman, welcome to the class as well. Welcome, everyone. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay. And so we are going to study about Moses today and what we'll try to understand what moved Moses to do things that eventually were recognized by God, and those behaviors were recognized later on as the most desired things for a leader. Okay, we'll see, because Moses did many things during his life before he was appointed the deliverer, the one who would guide the Jewish people out of slavery and to the promised land. Many things. But there was one specific thing that Moses did that was what God said, yeah, this is the one. And I mention this because I would say in this day and age, I don't know if that will be the criteria that we will use to select somebody as a leader. Maybe we'll use different criteria, but we'll try to learn from God what God actually liked from Moses. I'm not saying that God didn't like other things, but I guess some were more important than others. Okay? Yeah. So with that in mind, I always like to start with my first slide around 12:10, but I think I'm going to start it right away. I want to start it right away with the first part of the class. Start studying about Moses and all that. Okay, so here we go. Now, let me read this for you, and I will explain why this verse here is so important. Okay, I believe it's one of the most important verses on the early part of the book of Exodus. What it says is talking about Moses, right? And it says, And it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brothers, and he saw their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian man smiting a Hebrew man, one of his brothers. Let me tell you something that this reminds me a little bit of the story of Jacob and Esau. Remember that story, Jacob and Esau, the two twin brothers, the sons of Isaac. And why it reminds me to that? Because the Torah uses a very similar language that we don't know anything about them, about Jacob and Esau, from the time of birth. Right? Remember that the Torah describes that they were fighting inside the womb of the mother, and then eventually they were born, and Jacob was holding the heel of Esau. Right? So they were babies. They were babies, and then nothing. There's a huge jump in time until it says, and the kids grew up, and Esau became a hunter, and Jacob became a more quiet person who'll stay at home, right? And this is pretty much the same. We have Moses, and we do know about Moses when he was a baby, right? But and it's not really much about Moses himself, but about the circumstances around Moses' birth that we learn. And we learn that Moses ended up going to the Pharaoh's palace because he was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter. And then nothing, not a peep. What did he learn there? How did he look like? Did he have problems with other people? Was he bullied? Maybe he was the bully. I don't know. Nobody knows because the Torah doesn't say anything. In the same way that the Torah doesn't say anything about Jacob and Esau until a point where it said that they grew up. And then we start learning about the two. And here is the same. Here is the same. What we know nothing about Moses until the Torah says Moses was grown. Okay? Vaigdal Moshe. Vaigdal. Igdal comes from the Hebrew word gadol, big. When he's not a child. He's not a child anymore. But we do have some hints here about what happened during Moses' life in the palace. Number one, the most obvious one. How did Moses know that those slaves outside the palace were his brothers? Who told him that? Think about that. Where would he learn that? Why would somebody in the palace purposely told Moses about his origins, about his roots? It doesn't seem too logical to me in that kind of context in those days. And yet, he knew, because it says here that he went out to his brothers, okay, and saw their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian man hitting a Hebrew man, one of his brothers. So in other words, it's almost like in this verse is telling us that Moses doesn't feel like he's an Egyptian. It said that he's a Hebrew, just like his brothers. So what happened with Moses' identity? Can you see here? I can see that there is a tension. And that's why the rabbis understand all this story of the Egyptian hitting a Hebrew as a big metaphor. Now, try to imagine, because this could happen to many people. And I met many people in my life that they had an identity crisis, right? That they have two things pulling. And sometimes, especially with Jews, we have things like this all along history. Why? Because we've been moving from one place to another. So, but try to picture Jews living in Europe, right? even before the Holocaust, I think, when they were moving from one place to another, and they became, when they were allowed to become part of society, and then all of a sudden, they will have two aspects that sometimes were at odds with each other. And even in these days, we have the thing all the time. What are you? Are you Canadian or are you a Jew? What comes first? And there is a tension. And sometimes what happened is there is one part of ourselves that wants to be the prominent one, the strong one, the official one. And that's the one who is hitting the other one to control it, to get it as a servant. You know what I mean? So I'm wondering, and many people understand this, that the Egyptian hitting a Hebrew was not something that happened in the physical realm. It was something that happened inside Moses. That so far in the palace, what he had was the Egyptian having the Hebrew under control, under a thumb, so to speak. So there was Moses, the Egyptian, which, by the way, even the name, and we know how important names are in Judaism, right? But the name Moses was an Egyptian name that it was given to him. So the Egyptian hitting the Hebrew, right, is a metaphor here. But the fact that Moses, now that he's a grown-up, it means that he started thinking about all these issues. It looked like he has a problem of this Egyptian that does not allow the Hebrew to take a prominent role in Moses' life. He doesn't like that. And then he realized that the Hebrew he is a Hebrew like the other people that he sees outside, and they are his brothers. Okay? And he started having an identity crisis. Let me think let me know what you think in the chat. I see Shelley here. It says Moses probably always suspected the truth about his origin. But yes, but how do you suspect that? Because he was taken as a baby. It's not that he was taken as a child, as a toddler, which sometimes you may have memories for your previous life, but he was taken as a baby. I know that there are certain theories that, yes, even though Moses was adopted by an Egyptian mother, he was still nursed by his biological mother, remember? And so he may have, his biological family may have planted some seeds, right, about Moses' roots, that eventually they were always there. Maybe Moses wasn't sure what that really meant, but maybe at one point he actually reached out to other people and said, hey, do you know me? Do you know what my story? What am I here? And so forth. So it's a very interesting story. But for now, just remember that the story of the Egyptian hitting a Hebrew, sometimes we understand this as a big metaphor. Okay? Have that in mind as we continue with the next text. Now, Rashi understands. Rashi doesn't go into the theory of this being a metaphor, and Rashi is trying to understand this as a real thing of Moses relating to the slaves. Okay? So Rashi wrote as follows. The Hebrew phrase for he saw the burdens is vayar besivlotam. Okay? But the more correct Hebrew for this would be vayar et sivlotam, not be sivlotam, but et sivlotam, where their burdens is the direct object of his seeing. Okay? So basically we said, and he saw their burdens. If you want to say their burdens, you have to write in Hebrew vayar et sivlotam. But the Torah words are vayar be sivlotam, which is subtle change, which means he saw into their sufferings, meaning he identified with their suffering. Was a deeper way, of empathizing what they were going through. It was also when it said be siblotam over et siblotam, it also means that Moses would start asking, why are they enslaved? What have they done? What are they doing to deserve all this mistreatment from the Egyptians? Right? And this is something again. Remember that everything in the Torah has multiple layers. So even when Rashi is saying that this is about Moses seeing or looking at a bunch of slaves over there, this is the thing. And we always say something like that. I mean, the Jew, we always have the same questions when we look around and we see other Jews and they are suffering anti-Semitism and harassment and hate. And then we look not just about their suffering, but we look into their suffering and we ask the same questions. What have we done to deserve this? Is there something wrong in us? So Moses started thinking that way, because even though he probably didn't suffer, quote unquote, anti-Semitism or hate or harassment in the palace, he still feels that it's not fair with what his Jewish brothers and sisters are going through. So he starts having all this deep thought that a child doesn't have, an adult does. And that's why the Torah says that when Moses was a grown-up. Because at the end of the day, age is not what makes you a grown-up. What makes you a grown-up is when you start thinking and acting like a grown-up. And this is exactly what is happening to Moses at this stage of his life. So let's continue. Now, the Midrash said something very interesting, okay? Because it said, the Torah said Moses saw. And the Midrash asks, so what does "and he saw" mean? It means he saw their burdens and he cried and said, woe unto you, people of Israel, will that I could die for you, for there is no harsher work than working with cement. And Moses would bend his shoulder and help each and every one of them. He knew that Egypt, working on cement and making bricks and helping build all those buildings was the worst thing that could happen to somebody, Jew, not Jew. And it's interesting that it said Moses was even willing to abandon the comfort of the palace to go and try to help them. And this is something that is very interesting. And then as I mentioned, when we try to understand why Moses was appointed as a leader of the generation, what did he have that makes him so special? One of the things that we have to understand is that he wasn't just able to philosophically empathize with his brothers and sisters, but he was able also to leave the comfort of his home to go help them. Because that is the last step that many people never take. That there are many people who have great potential to become great leaders, but they never go into the last stage, which is leaving the comfort of whatever they are to go and be with the person, of the people that need help. and that is that is very common. That is very common. That's, leaders go thus far, but when things start getting uncomfortable, that is a limit that they never cross. But not Moses. Not Moses, because he knew how difficult their situation was. Yeah. But there is more. There is one thing that I wanna share with you, but it's gonna come in a minute. Before that, let me read this for you, and because here, as this rabbi is gonna say, we are discovering all the fine qualities of Moses as a leader. And it says, here we have a fine picture of the future leader. Okay, highly sensitive to the pain of other, deeply emphatic, benevolent, and actively involved. Okay? These features characterize Moses. The Torah leaves no room for doubt as to why this man was chosen for this historic and awesome task. Before Moses is chosen by God, the Torah relates 3 incidents regarding Moses getting involved with the suffering of others. And this is extremely important, so pay attention now. Okay? The struggle between a Jew and a non-Jew. This is the one we just read, when we saw an Egyptian beating a Jew. So what did Moses do? He intervened. But some people will say, well, I mean, isn't that obvious? Isn't that, Moses was a Hebrew. There was an Egyptian hitting a Hebrew. Of course, he will feel it personally and he will intervene. Okay? And that's fine. And there are many people that they were intervening in that situation. Look, think about you. You are a Jew. You're on the street and you see somebody harassing another Jew, a non-Jew harassing a Jew. Wouldn't you intervene, try to help? Of course. Okay? Of course. And Moses did just that. But this is what makes Moses different, because the things didn't end there. It says, then Moses got involved in the fight between a Jew and a Jew. Remember, this came after. Let's back up. Let's put a little context here. Moses saw the Egyptian beating the Jew, the Hebrew. So what did he do? Moses, he killed the Egyptian and buried him under the sand. Eventually, we don't know how long after that, he saw a Hebrew hitting a Hebrew. Okay? A Jew hitting or fighting with a Jew. And now Moses also intervenes there. Also intervenes. So it's not only when a Jew has a problem with a non-Jew, but when a Jew has a problem with another Jew, he also intervenes. And that's why they weren't nice to Moses. When one of them said to Moses, who do you think you are? Are you going to kill me the way you killed the Egyptian? And then that's when Moses said, oh, people know now what I did. So he had to run away from Egypt. Okay? But that's not the point. The point is that so far he intervenes also when there is a problem between a Jew and another Jew. And then, but not only that, he got also involved and it says, and the quarrel between Gentiles, that were Itro's daughter and another Gentile, the Midianite shepherds. So remember, when Moses had to leave Egypt, he went to the land of Midian, and he sees there 2 groups of non-Jewish people fighting with each other. And then many people will say, hey, this is none of my business. They are not Jews. They're not part of my group. So I have nothing to do with them. So I won't do anything. Not Moses. Moses had this sense of justice inside himself that it pushed him to intervene even when the 2 parties were not Jews. So here you can see something that made Moses special. He didn't care who he had in front of him. Was it a Jew, a non-Jew? Doesn't matter. If he noticed that it was an unfair situation, he was somehow moved to intervene to try to make the situation better. Even even if that meant that he had to run away from Egypt. Because had he didn't intervene between the fight of the two Jews, or the Egyptian with the Jew, he will still be in Egypt in the palace having a wonderful life. But he couldn't. He intervened even though it was not good for him in the short term. It was good in the long term, but he didn't know that at the time. Okay, so let's finish with this. This Rabbi Victor Bonchek notice about Moses. He says these stories, these three stories, depict Moses' unqualified, unlimited, and non-discriminatory appreciation from the pain of others. Okay. It also shows his proactive involvement in redeeming them from their suffering. This distinctive moral trait of a leader in Israel. So, in other words, what we learn here about Moses is that he would possess a very weird and rare and elusive trait, which is getting involved in a conflict between people to try to make it better, but he gets involved without any bias. It's very difficult because sometimes biases are embedded within ourselves. It looks like Moses was somehow able to get involved without all that kind of biases. And that's why make him an extraordinary leader for the people of Israel. Okay, but I don't think these things came, all this discovery of Moses of who he was something easy for him. I don't think so, because you see, let me read. Selfless. And that was one of the things from Moses as well. And eventually he will say that about being selfless. And once Moses became the leader of the Jewish people and they were in the desert and the people of Israel complained about Moses' leadership. Okay, they didn't want Moses as a leader anymore. And Moses complains. And what he says, and it's shocking, when he says is, why are they complaining about me? I haven't even touched a donkey from them, which means, I don't want their money. I don't want them to give me things, right? Why are they complaining? And it was interesting because I was thinking, okay, why would Moses use those words? Why didn't Moses say, what are they complaining about me? I have God's approval. God says that I am the leader. But no, he was so selfless and so humble that he didn't even use that as an argument. I said, what are they complaining about me? Have I ever even stole anything from them? Am I here because I want power or money? No. I'm here just because I want to help them. That's my mission. Not because of God. Not because of money, just because I want to help them. Nothing for me, everything for them. Okay? But again, let's go back now to the moment that Moses realized who he was. And once he realized who he was, that's it. And before even we go to that, what I want to mention is, I don't know if it ever happens to you, where sometimes we have to make big decisions in our lives and we struggle. We struggle to make decisions. And what happened is that we struggle until we discover what our mission or our goal is. Sometimes one will realize who we are, what our mission is, what our goal is, then the decisions come easier because now you know what you want. With Moses was pretty much the same. Up to that point, he struggled a lot because he still had that conflict inside himself. He had to, every day, he will go probably walking around thinking, what am I or who am I? Am I an Egyptian? I'm a Hebrew. If I'm Egyptian, I have to make decisions as an Egyptian. If I'm a Hebrew, I have to make decisions as a Hebrew. But until he realized who he was, he struggled. Once he realized who he was, then everything else came a little easier. Let me explain what I'm saying. Exodus chapter 2, verse 12. Please remember this verse because this is when everything happened. Okay? So remember, Moses saw the Egyptian hitting or beating the Jew. Okay? He saw it. Next verse is this one that you have right there. It says, he, Moses, turned this way and that way. Okay? Let me do it again because this is very important. This way and that way. Okay? Seeing that there was no man, he struck down the Egyptian and hit him in the sand. This is one of the most wonderful verses I've ever read in the Torah. And this is a beautiful metaphor that we should, and I guess at one point we all go through this, right? When we are struggling and we have an identity crisis, so we look at one side and we look at the other side, okay? But let me go even further here, because now the rabbis say, use your imagination. Let's say that you are Moses, okay? Just try to picture yourself as Moses. You get out of the palace, okay? You get out of the palace because you go see your brothers there. You're not inside the palace, you're outside now. And then you look one way and the other way. What did you see? What did you see? You look one way, you look at the slaves, the Hebrews. You look the other way, you look at the palace, okay? There are two things, two different aspects. And you know what happened at that point exactly? He said, no, but Shelley, you said the key is no man. Hashem was watching, yes. But the rabbi said that this no man is talking about Moses. Moses. He said, well, he had these two things fighting inside his head. They were fighting. There was no man. He wasn't a whole person. He wasn't a person. He didn't feel human with that. That's what he said. There was no man. No man, it was Moses. He wasn't a man yet. He couldn't. Well, he had this thing because he had to make a decision. After he made a decision, he became a man. Not before. And that is also a sign that he grew up. Before he was a child, now he's a man because he was able to make a decision. He was able to decide by himself who he was. Hey, Moses could have decided at the time that he was Egyptian, and that's fine. That's fine. We will never be, by now we probably wouldn't even know who this man was, but he was a man. He will be a man as well because he also made a decision at the time. Who knows how many Moses we had back then in those that we don't even know about them. They are not part of this. They are not part of the Torah because when they looked one side and saw the slaves and the other side they saw the palace, they decided to stay with the palace, and that's fine. But not Moses. Moses felt that there was no man. There was something inside him that they will keep him awake at night, and he wasn't at peace with himself until he decided, I'm a Hebrew. Who am I trying to fool here? That's who I am. And at that point, he realized that he was a man. And what did he do next? It's right there in front of you. Read it. He struck down the Egyptian. Who was the Egyptian? The other side of Moses. And buried him in the sand. No more Egyptian. For now, it was just the Hebrew Moses. But it didn't happen until he was able to say, hey, on this side, I have this. On that side, I had that. They both called to me. But I have to make a decision. I can't be both. I can't be both. Because one is harassing the other. So he decided to go back to his roots at that moment. That's why I think it's a beautiful verse. That Now, let's continue. Remember, Moses have to leave. He has to escape. Okay? He has to escape because he was wanted for killing the Egyptians. That wasn't acceptable. It was not acceptable that somebody that have the opportunity to stay in Egypt, to be part of the palace, would prefer to be a Jew. So now that he discovered who he was, he needed to start a new journey to really go deep into what it means to be this new Moses. Okay? And you will see that the Egyptian Moses somehow was still present. And it will take a while to Moses to flush out the Egyptian Moses. It wasn't as easy as burying that Egyptian under the sun, because that will follow Moses everywhere. It's not something that he could do overnight, but now he made a decision, so everything was easier. He made a decision. So let me read this for you. It says, now Moses, was tending the sheep. So this is, he left, he went to Midian. He was welcomed by Yitro, and he married one of Yitro's daughters. Okay? So this is what happened. Now, so he became one of the shepherds of Yitro. Now Moses was tending the sheep of Yitro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, leading the flock to the far side of the desert. He came to the mountain of God, to Horeb. Now it's interesting, and we don't know why the Torah called that mount the mountain of God. We don't know. We don't know why. Now, the angel of Adonai appeared to him, to Moses, in a fire blazing from the middle of a bush. You know the story, the burning bush. He looked and saw that although the bush was flaming with fire, yet the bush was not being burned up. Moses said, I'm going to go over and see this amazing sight and find out why the bush isn't being burned up. When Adonai saw that he had gone over to see, God called to him from the middle of the bush, saying, Moses, Moses. And he answered, here I am. That was a fascinating thing. So actually, it should be Moses, Moses. That was the way. I can imagine a little echo there, sounding with the voice of God. God, Moses. So there is so much also packed here on this thing, and why did God wait until Moses coming close to the burning bush to call him? And I'm asking all of you if you have any clue, any idea of why God waited until Moses came closer to the bush to go and call him by name. Right? Shelley Chochin of you said the first Hineni. No, the first Hineni was Abraham, when God called Abraham, and Abraham's. And also says Hineni, right? Yeah, Hineni, here I am. So any idea why God will wait and not call Moses right away? Because the story could be very different. He said, let's say that Moses was with the sheep, they are close to the mountain, and then as Moses was near the mountain, Moses heard a voice coming from the mountain saying, Moses, Moses. Oh, so then Moses will come closer, and then Moses will see that God was there at the burning bush. But no. When Moses came closer to the burning bush, Moses didn't know that God would be calling him from there. But there is something very interesting here. And remember, we are trying to figure out here more characteristics of Moses that eventually will serve him to be an even better leader. Okay? So the fact that Moses came close to the burning bush is also talking about Moses' fine traits. Let me explain a few things that happen here. Like, for example, number one, the rabbi said, why was he doing there on the far side of the desert? And the Midrash will say that Moses was there because one of the sheep ran away from the flock. So Moses went all the way to that area of the mountain to rescue this little sheep, little poor sheep. So, number one, there, God noticed that Moses was able to take care of that little sheep, and so it said, somebody who can care that much for that little animal will have the heart also to be a leader of a group of people. So that's why you will see that it was very common that the heroes from the Torah were also shepherds, because at least they presented that to become a shepherd you need a certain heart. You have to take care of each one of the animals. That usually they walk together once in a while will run away, and then you have to go, outside your comfort zone to go and bring the animal back. So point for Moses there. But the other thing, and people usually don't talk about this enough, is the fact that, I can't even imagine how many times Moses was going to that mountain with the sheep, so the sheep can eat grass, right? And all of a sudden, Moses noticed that it was something out of the ordinary. It was a burning bush there. And I can imagine that many people will go there and they will see a burning bush and it was something extraordinary, and they will say, I'm too busy with my sheep. What do I care about the burning bush? Right? It's not part of my job. So they will keep going with the sheep like nothing happened. For Moses, said, whoa, hold on a minute. Looking at, there is a burning bush there. This is not normal. This is not common. I have to go see what's going on here. So we see a Moses that is curious. It's a curious Moses. And he noticed that something was out of the ordinary, and he wanted to know more. So this is a Moses also that is not content what he knows today. He wants to know more. He's curious. He wants to know more about the world. He wants to discover new things. So he was moved by this phenomenon of a burning bush, and he goes out of the way to try to explore what is that. And it's interesting that it is in that curiosity of going and exploring the fascinating things in the world that he was able to discover God. And I think that is also talking to all of us, right? That sometimes we are so much sucked up into our routine that either we don't see or we ignore all the beautiful and wonderful things around us. So Moses is teaching us that it's very important to be attentive and to pay attention to all these wonderful things around us, because at the end of the day, this is a place where you can find God if you know where to look. I think that is a beautiful thing, that Moses was able to find God through his curiosity. Because up to this point, we learn lots of beautiful traits of Moses. He was a fighter for justice, right? He was a man who cared for animals and so forth. But we never knew anything of what role God had to play in Moses' life. The Torah doesn't say that up to this moment. Okay? But we know now that Moses was a curious man, and that allowed him to discover God in a deeper level. So, the other question that we have to ask ourselves now is, why didn't God appear to Moses after his courageous act of smiting the Egyptian, or after he reproached two Hebrews who were fighting? right? But so why would God waited all this long to say to Moses, 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 right? Why did God wait all this long? That's another question that we have to answer. And this is the fascinating answer to that question from the Midrash Rabbah, that it says, once when Moses was a shepherd for his father-in-law Yitro in the desert of Midian, a small lamb ran away from the rest of the flock. Moses ran after her to catch her. The lamb found a shady place with a spring of water. She rested there and drank slake her thirst. When Moses found her there drinking, he exclaimed, I didn't know that you ran away because you were thirsty. You must be so tired. Moses took the lamb on his shoulders and carried her back to the flock. Said God, listen to this. Moses, you are compassionate. So your compassion extends to every animal in the flock. You should also care for my flock, the children of Israel. So what happened here is old Moses, passion about justice, to the point that he was able to kill the Egyptians to protect the Hebrew. It's all good. It's all good. But that is not the most important thing on a leader. And God was trying to make a point here. The number one requirement was the fact that he was compassionate. And that is something that is amazing. That's why God didn't appear to Moses until Moses proved that he was a compassionate man. And that's when God said, Moses, Moses. Not what he was killing, not when he was fighting, not when he was arguing, but when he was taking care of a simple lamb. I think it's a beautiful thing to let us know what is important in our traits, right? And I will skip this one. This is talking about the same thing. Now, there is another thing, because I see that we are getting short of time. I want to, let's see, the text that I wanted to, this one here. I taught it before, but I always like to review this, and I think it's going to be a beautiful way to wrap up this lesson on a lighter tone, if you want. We learn about deep things about Moses, about discovering himself, about his identity crisis, and that's all good. That's all good. But this here is one of the most interesting parts, I believe. Interesting. I don't know. It's not talking about Moses' leadership skills or anything like that, but it's a reminder of something that we learned at the beginning of the Torah, and since then we forgot. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. Now, Exodus 3:5. That is the next chapter. It says, when God says to Moses, 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 and Moses said, here I am, Hineni, right? And then God said, hop, don't come any closer to the burning bush. Don't come any closer. Okay, so let me do it again the way I did it before, right? It was said, don't come any closer. Take your sandals off your feet, because the place where you are standing is holy ground. That's what God said to Moses. What's the connection between holy ground and take your sandals off? Can you explain it to me? Why is it so important for Moses to take the sandals off? Because he's in holy ground. Think about that. And I will give you more hints. So that means that if... Hello, Roberto, welcome. So that means that if that place was holy ground, what is the rest of the ground? What is the rest of the earth, planet Earth? If that specific spot is holy ground, what is the rest? I guess there are two answers for that. One, you will see the rest is not holy, common ground. But what the rabbi said, that section of the bush was holy ground. The rest of the ground is cursed ground. Cursed ground. And the reason why we have to wear sandals, shoes, flip-flops, Crocs, you name it, is because we need a layer of separation between ourselves and the ground that is cursed. I said, what? What do you mean the ground is cursed? You don't believe me? Let me prove it to you. Genesis 3:17. Okay? Remember Adam and Eve. They sinned. They ate from the forbidden fruit. So God said, to Adam, God said, because you listened to what your wife said and ate from the tree about which I gave you the order, you are not to eat from it, the ground is cursed on your account. You will work hard to eat from it as long as you live. So what does it mean? What it means is, since Genesis chapter 3, and then we forgot about that, it means that the whole earth, the ground of the earth is cursed thanks to Adam and Eve. Blame them. Because of them, the ground is cursed. So the rabbi said one of the reasons why we wear shoes is so we don't touch the ground that is cursed. Okay? So for some reason, God is letting Moses know that the ground is cursed, but not that place. The place of the burning bush with God is revealing himself to Moses is holy ground. God has to make that explicit to Moses. So because it's holy ground, God is saying to Moses, you don't need the sandals here. You can touch it. Because this ground is not cursed, it's holy. So remove those dirty shoes, the one that were in contact with the cursed ground, and you can touch this holy ground. Roberto Franco, you said the act of removing shoes might symbolize reverence, humility, and respect in the presence of the divine. It was a recognition that the ground was sanctified by God's presence. For him, this marked a pivotal moment of divine calling and acknowledgments of God's holiness. Yeah, but there is a philosophical understanding, Roberto. But what the rabbis are teaching here is that there is a theological reason. Because we forget that the ground was cursed because of Adam and Eve. So basically, the shoes we use is to separate ourselves from the cursed ground and ourselves. And that's why in Jewish practice, and this is something people sometimes don't know, when you put on the shoes or remove the shoes, if you touch the shoes, then you have to wash your hands. Because now your hands are impure because you touched the shoe that it was in touch with cursed ground. Okay, so we wash our hands after we handle shoes. And some people don't know that. That is Jewish law. So, and this has many implications, the thing of the cursed ground and the shoes and this. For example, it's mentioned in the Talmud. I want to read it for you. Rabbi Yochanan said, as one dons tefillin, the tefillin, things that we put in our arm or in our heads, as one dons tefillin, so should he put his shoes. For example, just as tefillin are worn on the left hand, so too, one who puts on his shoes should begin with the left shoe. Okay? Do you know that according to Judaism, you have to put the left shoe first? It says, they challenge this ruling from the following Baraita. When a person puts on his shoes, he put his right shoe first, and after this, he put on the left shoe. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said, one who fears heaven can fulfill both directives. Listen to this. And who was it that followed this practice? Mar, the son of Rabbana. He will put on his right shoe first, but he will not tie it And then he will put on his left shoe and tie it. And then he will tie his right shoe. Thus, he will put on his right shoe first, as the Baraita directs, and he tied his left shoe first, in accordance with Rabbi Yochanan's ruling. And this is the way many people do it. Unless you have shoes that they don't have shoelaces. And I have new shoes now that you don't even have to touch them. They have this system that the heel of the shoe is hard, so you can just step on it. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. So you don't even have to use your hand to handle the shoes. But this, according to the Talmud, this is the way. This is the way we handle our shoes when we put it. Okay, and the same thing, this left and right. The Shulchan Aruch, we said, and it's the same procedure for the morning netilat yadayim, the washing of the hands in the morning. I said one takes the utensil filled with water with the right hand and transfer it to the left hand. Then he pours the water first into his right hand. After this, he takes the utensil filled with water in his right hand and pours the water into the left hand. He should do this 3 times. This is the same thing some people do before they eat bread. You take the water on the right hand, but you don't wash your hand. First, you pass it to your left, and then you pour the water. That's why the utensil that we use to wash our hands before we eat bread, for example, has 2 handles. Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever wondered why it has 2 handles? For this, exactly for this. Because sometimes we have to pass it from one hand to the other. Okay? Yeah. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in this afternoon. Thank you for sharing this virtual classroom with me. And I hope you're all having a wonderful day, and I hope you're going to have an even better rest of your day. So remember, this class is going to be rebroadcasted tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. And so you can catch up if you missed part of the classes before. But you can also visit our YouTube channel. That this class is going to be available on demand right after I hit the end stream button. So that's another option if you want to go back and revisit the class. But, if you like the experience of watching a class live, you can wait until 8 p.m. Central Times to watch it again. Okay? Thank you so much. See you next week. Always Thursday at noon Central Time. We have a date to study Torah together here with Torah L'Chaim with me, your host, Rabbi Anibal. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe. Hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone.